The busy woman loved her job as a flight attendant. Meeting new people was the reason that she took the job in the first place. She enjoyed meeting new people and seeing new places, and the excitement of flying never wore off. On this particular flight, she was doing her usual rounds, making sure everyone was comfortable and had everything they needed. But she never expected what was about to happen on that particular flight. 35-year-old Jessie Knocklin had seen all sorts of passengers in her years as a flight attendant, but the little boy in seat 14B was something else. He couldn't have been more than 6, with tousled brown hair and bright, mischievous eyes. She had dealt with her fair share of naughty children on flights. The boy was just like all the other children. He was nervous about flying. He was making strange signs with his hands, and Jessie couldn't help but chuckle. As she moved down the aisle, she noticed the boy making funny signs with his hands. Jessie laughed softly at his antics, catching his eye. He grinned at her and started making funny noises too, like a little animal. Jessie found herself chuckling more, his infectious joy brightening her day. The boy's father, sitting next to him, was engrossed in his laptop, typing away furiously. He didn't seem to notice his son's playful behavior. Jessie found it odd, but didn't dwell on it. She continued her rounds, occasionally glancing back at Sam, who kept looking at her and making more signs and noises. As Jessie walked down the aisle, the boy caught her eye and started making exaggerated faces, puffing out his cheeks and crossing his eyes. She stifled a laugh, glancing at his father, who was too engrossed in his laptop to notice. "Can I get you anything?" Jessie asked the father, but he waved her off without looking up. The boy, emboldened by his father's distraction, continued his antics. He started making noises now, odd little chirps and whistles that made Jessie smile despite herself. "Hey there, what's your name?" she asked the boy, crouching down to his level. "Sam," he said proudly, his face breaking into a wide grin. "Well, Sam, you're quite the entertainer," Jessie said, shaking her head in amusement. "But you need to keep it down, okay? People are trying to rest." Sam nodded solemnly, but Jessie wasn't convinced he'd stay quiet for long. She moved on, checking on other passengers and handing out drinks. But every time she glanced back, there was Sam, still making faces and signs, now to the delight of a couple of nearby passengers. Jessie tried to focus on her work, but Sam's antics were hard to ignore. She served drinks to an elderly couple, only to hear giggles erupting from Sam's direction. She turned to see him sticking his tongue out and wiggling his fingers at his ears. The flight attendant was getting tired of him. "Sam, honey, please sit still," Jessie said, her patience wearing thin. "But I'm bored," Sam whined, looking up at her with wide eyes. "Maybe you can draw something?" Jessie suggested, hoping to distract him. "I don't have anything to draw with," Sam replied, shrugging dramatically. Jessie sighed and rummaged through her bag. She found a pen and a napkin and handed them to Sam. "Here, draw me something nice, okay?" Sam took the pen eagerly and started drawing. Jessie continued her rounds, but it wasn't long before she heard a shrill whistle. She turned to see Sam holding up his napkin, now covered in doodles, and making more noises. "Look what I made," he called out, waving the napkin in the air. "That's great, Sam," Jessie said, trying to keep her voice cheerful. "But you need to keep it down, okay?" Sam nodded, but his attention span was short. Moments later, he was up on his knees, peering over the seat back, making faces at the passengers behind him. Jessie watched as an older woman chuckled and waved back at him. But after she did the same thing 7 times, she was annoyed. "Sam, please sit down," Jessie said, a bit more firmly this time, but she had no idea why the boy was so irritable. Sam pouted but obeyed, only to start bouncing in his seat a minute later. Jessie felt her patience fraying. It looked bad on her if she couldn't control her passengers. She shot a glance at Sam's father, who was still absorbed in his laptop, oblivious to his son's behavior. "Excuse me, sir," Jessie said, approaching the father again. "Could you please ask your son to sit quietly?" But would the indifferent father listen? The man looked up, blinking as if he'd just noticed where he was. He glanced at Sam, then back at Jessie. Sure," he said, turning to his son. "Sam, buddy, sit down, okay?" "But Dad, I'm bored," Sam protested. The boy persisted in pressing buttons on his father's laptop. He picked his laptop up into the air. "Just read something or play with your toys," his father mumbled, returning to his laptop. But he only listened to him for a few minutes. As Jessie walked past, the boy made a series of exaggerated hand signs, sticking his tongue out and crossing his eyes. She chuckled, giving him a playful wink. "You're a little comedian, aren't you?" she said, ruffling his hair. His father, seated beside him, was engrossed in his laptop and barely looked up. "Sam, keep it down," the father mumbled absent-mindedly. But it didn't look like little Sam was going to stop anytime soon. Jessie continued her pre-flight duties, but Sam's antics were hard to ignore. He was the most irritable child she had ever dealt with. Every time she glanced his way, he was performing some new funny trick with his hands. The other passengers were looking at him with exasperation. It wasn't long before the airplane began to taxi, and Jessie noticed Sam still wasn't seated with his seatbelt fastened. She was running out of time. Jessie sighed inwardly. Clearly, she was on her own with this one. She gave Sam a stern look. "Sam, you need to sit down and be quiet. Can you do that for me?" Sam nodded. But it wasn't long before he was at it again, this time making whooping sounds and pretending to be an airplane. Jessie took a deep breath and walked back to her station. She needed a moment to compose herself. The flight was about to embark. As she stood there, taking deep breaths, she could still hear Sam's noises. She glanced over to see him standing on his seat now, flapping his arms. She hurried over, her patience finally snapping. "Sam, sit down right now," she said sharply, startling the boy. Sam's eyes widened, and he plopped down in his seat, finally quiet. Jessie took another deep breath, trying to calm down. She glanced at his father, who had finally noticed the commotion and was looking at her with a puzzled expression. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Jessie forced a smile. "Just fine, sir, just fine." She turned and walked away, muttering under her breath. Just wish Sam would sit down for more than 5 seconds. As she continued her duties, Jessie couldn't help but glance back at Sam, who was now sulking in his seat. She hoped the rest of the flight would be uneventful, but she had a feeling that, with Sam on board, anything could happen. The annoyed flight attendant was in for the worst flight of her life. Jessie frowned, her patience waning. She leaned closer to Sam. "Come on, Sam. It's really important." But Sam continued making signs with his hands, his small fingers moving rapidly in the air. Jessie crouched down to the boy's level, her smile fading slightly as she noticed a hint of red on his hands. She started to get more worried. "Hi there," she said softly. "Can you show me your hands, sweetie?" Sam extended his hands towards her. He showed her both his hands, including his palms. He thought it was a game. They were indeed red, and as she looked closer, Jessie saw that he was scratching them frequently. Her initial amusement turned into a flicker of concern. It seemed as though something was bothering this child. Jessie was determined to find out what was wrong with him. The concerned flight attendant held the boy's hands in hers. She looked at them closely, distinguishing the rash from the scratch marks. "Sir!" she called again, this time with more urgency. I think there's something wrong with your son's hands. She held them up for him to see. The father finally tore his eyes away from his laptop and looked at Sam's hands. His face paled. Sam, what's wrong? Suddenly, he was a concerned father. Sam's hands were moving more erratically now, and Jesse noticed they were red, as if he had been scratching them. The father tried to grab his son's arms, but he wouldn't let him. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just stubbornness. Something was wrong. The worried flight attendant noticed that the father didn't know how to control him either. Sir, can I speak to you for a moment? Jesse addressed the father. The man sighed and closed his laptop. Yes, what is it? He pretended that Sam was just an agitated boy afraid of flying. Your son needs to put his seatbelt on, and I'm concerned about his hands. They look irritated, Jesse explained. She pointed out that they were in line to depart. The plane would be airborne in a few minutes, and his son refused to strap his seatbelt on. It was getting out of hand. The father looked at Sam's hands, his brow furrowing. Sam, what's going on? He grabbed his son's shirt. He wiggled and squirmed to get away from his father. Sam didn't answer, just kept making those signs and noises. Jessie felt a knot of worry tighten in her stomach.
Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story.
Is there something wrong with his hands? Has he been scratching them a lot? Jessie asked. The father shook his head. I don't know. He's been acting strange all day. Jessie took a deep breath. Sir, I think we need to get a closer look. This could be an allergic reaction or something serious. Sam didn't respond verbally, but continued making the odd signs with his hands. Jessie felt a knot of worry tighten in her chest. Has he been in contact with anything unusual recently? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. She was fishing for information and had a suspicion that the father knew more than he was saying. The father shook his head, his expression bewildered. No, not that I know of. He was fine this morning. Jessie felt the plane begin to taxi towards the runway. She needed to get Sam seated and strapped in, but more importantly, she needed to find out what was causing his reaction. Sir, we need to get him seated for takeoff, but once we're in the air, I'll get the medical kit, and we can take a closer look. But she had no clue what she was going to find. The plane was about to take off, and Jessie knew she had to act quickly. She signaled to a fellow flight attendant, "Can you get the first aid kit, and maybe alert the captain that we might need medical assistance?" Sam's father looked alarmed now. Do you think it's that serious? I don't know, but it's better to be safe, Jessie replied, trying to keep her voice calm. The other flight attendant brought the first aid kit, and Jessie knelt down beside Sam. Sam, can you show me your hands? At first, Sam was scared, and he tried to hide under the seat. His father had to coax him out. Eventually, he listened. Reluctantly, Sam extended his hands. They were red and swollen, small scratches marring the skin. Jessie felt a rush of concern. Okay, sweetie, we're going to help you, Jessie said softly. She opened the first aid kit and pulled out some antiseptic wipes and bandages, but she had no idea if it was going to help him. The flight attendant continued to question his father. Sir, do you know if Sam has any allergies? Jessie asked the father. Not that I'm aware of, he replied, looking increasingly worried. Jessie gently cleaned Sam's hands, trying to soothe him. You're doing great, Sam. Just a little longer, okay? Sam whimpered, but didn't resist. Jessie worked quickly, bandaging the worst of the scratches, but she had no clue what was going to happen next. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a slight delay and are about to take off soon. Please remain seated, and we will update you shortly. Jessie felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She glanced at Sam's father, who was now fully attentive. "I think we need to get him checked out as soon as we land," Jessie said. The father nodded. "Thank you for noticing. I didn't realize—" "It's okay," Jessie reassured him. "We'll take care of him." Reluctantly, the father nodded and managed to get Sam to sit down and buckle his seatbelt. The boy was visibly uncomfortable, his hands still moving in those strange, agitated patterns. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Jessie couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with Sam. She stayed by his side, ready to act if things got worse. The engines roared to life, and the plane began its ascent. The airplane began to move, preparing for takeoff. Jessie noticed Sam still standing, refusing to sit down and put on his seatbelt. She walked over, her friendly demeanor intact. "All right, Sam, it's time to sit down and put your seatbelt on." Sam pouted and shook his head. "No, I don't want to." Jessie sighed, her patience slightly tested. "Come on, Sam, it's for your safety." He was going to get her into trouble. He continued to resist, and Jessie felt a flicker of frustration. But then she noticed something alarming. Sam's neck and face were red and looked like he was itching. She bent down for a closer look and saw tiny bumps all over them. It seemed as though it was more than just a rash. "Sam, are your hands hurting?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. He wasn't saying anything about his face or hands. Suddenly, Jessie noticed Sam's arms. They were getting redder, and he was scratching them vigorously. She squatted down to get a better look. "Sam, does your hand hurt?" she asked gently. "It's itchy," Sam replied, his voice small and uncertain now. He started to scratch the bandages off his arms in irritability. Alarm bells rang in Jessie's head. She turned to the father. "Excuse me, sir. Your son's face is very red. Has he been scratching a lot?" The father finally looked up, his eyes narrowing in concern. He looked surprised to see his son's face in that condition. "Let me see," he said, taking Sam's hands in his. "It looks like he has a rash," he muttered. Jessie felt a jolt of adrenaline. "I think we need to check this out. We can't ignore a rash like this, especially on a flight." She quickly called the captain, explaining the situation. Sam nodded, his playful demeanor now replaced by discomfort. Jessie turned to his father, gently tapping his shoulder. "Excuse me, sir. I think your son has a serious rash on his hands." Stanley, the father, looked around nervously, his face paling when he saw Sam's hands. "Oh my God, it looks bad. It wasn't like this earlier." Jessie's heart raced. "We need to check this out. It could be something serious." She was stressed, but she had to control the situation. She quickly notified the captain and the head flight attendant. They decided to stop the plane before takeoff. The passengers were informed, and the cabin filled with murmurs of concern and curiosity. "What's happening?" a passenger asked. "There's a medical situation," Jessie replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "We're taking precautions." But she was losing control on the inside. The captain, understanding the gravity, decided to stop the flight. "We can't risk it," he said over the intercom. "Everyone, please remain seated while we address a medical concern." Passengers began to murmur, their conversations a low hum of anxiety and curiosity. Some people pointed at the little boy. Jessie could feel the weight of their gazes on her as she led Sam and his father off the plane. Everybody was staring at them as they walked down the aisle. Sam and Stanley were escorted off the plane, the tension thick in the air. Jessie could see the fear in Stanley's eyes. He really looked confused. "I don't know what happened," he said, his voice shaky. "He was fine this morning." Jessie stayed with them, trying to keep both of them calm. It might just be an allergic reaction, but we need to be sure. We're getting you to a medical facility right away. Sam looked up at Jessie, his eyes wide with fear. Am I going to be okay? He didn't understand why they got off the plane. Jessie knelt down and took his small red hand in hers. We're going to make sure you get the help you need, Sam. As they stepped into the terminal, a medical team was already waiting. We need to examine the boy, a doctor said, his tone serious. The medical team arrived quickly, assessing Sam's condition. Jessie watched anxiously as they worked, her heart pounding. Jessie stood by, watching as Sam's hands were carefully inspected. She felt a knot of worry in her stomach. What if it was something contagious? What if the entire plane was at risk? The doctor looked up, his expression unreadable. We need to run some tests. It could be an allergic reaction, but we can't be sure without further examination. Stanley looked pale, his eyes wide with fear. A virus? Are you saying he could have a virus? He wasn't sure how to handle the situation. The worried father chatted about it, maybe being peanuts. We have to be cautious, the doctor replied, but we'll know more soon. Stanley nodded, visibly relieved but still worried. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Jessie took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had to leave the little boy in the safe care of the medics. Her part was done. The other passengers were still on the plane, likely growing more anxious by the minute. She needed to keep them calm. It was all part of the job. As the ambulance drove away, Jessie returned to the plane, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about little Sam. She informed the passengers that the situation was under control and that they would be taking off shortly. But her mind was still on Sam. Returning to the aircraft, Jessie explained the situation as best as she could. We've taken the boy and his father off for medical evaluation. We need to be patient while we wait for more information. A murmur of concern swept through the cabin. What if it's something serious? A woman in the back called out. We're taking all necessary precautions, Jessie assured them. Please remain seated and calm. We'll keep you updated. The plane had been inspected. There were no foreseen risks, so the aircraft was all clear to take off again, this time with 2 less passengers. Minutes felt like hours as they waited. Jessie couldn't help but replay the events in her mind, questioning if she had done everything right. What if she had missed something? She felt like she could have prevented the boy from getting so bad, but she knew that she was just beating herself up about it. Finally, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've received word from the medical team. The boy is being treated for an allergic reaction. He does not have a virus. A collective sigh of relief filled the cabin. Jessie felt the tension ease from her shoulders. She had done her job, and everyone was safe. As the plane prepared to take off once more, Jessie checked on the passengers, her smile returning. The ordeal was over, but it was a reminder of the unpredictable nature of her job. Each day brought new challenges, and it was her duty to face them with calm and courage.